Welcome to our podcast. We are exposing mold. My name is Keely Severson, and today I'm here with my co-hosts, Eric Johnson and Alicia Swami, and we have special guests. We have Jim from Earthblock International in Earthblock, Texas, and we have Lisa from Colorado Earth. Jim and Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Our pleasure.
Jim,
Yes, thank you.
You said you had a interesting story to share with us. Can you share your story with us?
That was for Lisa? I'm sorry.
Oh no, the story
okay.
that you wanted to share with us.
Well, is it the story I mentioned to you about my wife's chemical sensitivity? She worked at, she's a psychologist. She worked at a Kaiser in California, in Santa Rosa. And the hospital decided to build a new building for the mental health professionals, all the psychologists and psychiatrists into one building. Now, Nora's been chemically sensitive her whole life, but she was okay in the old building. But when they moved her into the new building with, new carpet and new paint and new upholstery and new glue and windows that don't open, she immediately started a severe downward spiral to the point where she quit her job, and we moved to Colorado. And my primary concern when I arrived in Colorado was to find a healthier house for my wife. And I explored a lot of different mediums, tire houses, straw houses. Neither of those suited my fancy, but I saw this video of a machine popping out 300 Adobes an hour, and I went, that's it. And I leased a machine from New Mexico and built my first house, and that was 28 years ago, and I have never looked back. Built of earth continuously since. How it relates to you is that it's an all natural material. There's no chemical poisons in it, unless you're mining poison dirt, which we try to avoid. It's breathable. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits to earthen construction: fireproof, soundproof, bug-proof, bulletproof. Bulletproof has increasing popularity suddenly for some reason. But the most important benefit, I think, of earthen walls is that they're breathable. And by breathable, that means they absorb and release water vapor. Okay, they will take in the toxins. If you have a truly breathable wall, they'll take them out. They're not giving you any, and they soak them up, So it's all natural. And that's about earth blocks specifically, short term, but the mold issue is, we don't mold, but particularly if we use lime. If you use lime as a stabilizer in the block or lime as the plaster, you can't have mold because lime has a pH of 12.4 and mold can't grow there. It's impossible. So I had one of my teachers advocate all hospitals should be painted with lime paint. It's but they don't. They use latex. So that's my part of the story. Lisa's got a story to tell too.
Sure, thanks, Jim. Well, I got into earthen construction really from an interest in natural building, green building, kind of from an environmental point of view. So after engineering, I moved to New Zealand, where I started a little art program. And there is where I was introduced to Adobe, or mud bricks, they call them down under. So I lived there for a handful of years and designed and built houses down there. What really drew me to it was the aesthetics, as well as I mentioned, just the kind of beauty of the material and what you can do with it. And then, of course, learning about all the benefits. And the health has been something that's kind of, I feel like, grown and increasing awareness in the last few years, and people now seeking, Jim and I for work in homes because they have these health sensitivities, and organizations forming around supporting these people. So it's something that it's great to be here and be talking with you about it and share from our perspective. I think one of the things that's part of not just the line, as Jim said, and the products that we make the blocks with, but also just the energy efficiency. So less heating and cooling, forced air, indoor air quality being improved. So we can kind of jump into that, but I think that's a very, very much a big part of healthy homes and making sure that the air quality indoors is well performing and healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for sharing your story. And yeah, Lisa, I actually wanted to dive into that, the energy efficiency portion. A lot of people within our realm, a lot of mold remediators, et cetera, builders, they often say that, these sustainable buildings, they're built more tightly to be energy efficient, et cetera. And I just wanted to know, the way that they're building sustainable homes now, is it actually sustainable? And are Adobe's far more superior than these new buildings that they're coming out with?
Superior to what? I missed the last couple words.
Yeah, so are Adobe Homes far more superior in energy efficiency, heating and cooling than these actual sustainable buildings that they build nowadays?
Yes.
I'll elaborate.
Unequivocally, he said, and I see Lisa trembling over there because, of course, it varies from climate zone to climate zone what you have to do to make that yes true. But let me give you a quick anecdote about energy efficiency. Well, first of all, what we do to build our walls depends on where we are. I'm in Texas right now fighting the heat. Lisa's in Colorado fighting the cold, okay? And we do well both ways, but it's a different system. I built a house for a guy in Wimberley, Texas, just west of Austin, about 8 years ago. And he called me when I was in Colorado with Lisa about 3 years ago, just to report that we here in Texas, he was having, a heat wave. Had been over 100 for 3 weeks in a row. And he said, Jim, all my neighbors are spending between $350 and $500 a month to keep from frying. He's a gizmo guy, so he has a gizmo on his thermostat where he can punch a little button and it reads out how many kilowatts he's using and what it's costing him. So he keeps real careful track of his energy costs. He said they're spending $500 a month. He said, I'm spending $1.02 a day. So, now he did everything right. It wasn't just the earthen walls, but he does have 14-inch thick earthen walls. He has white lime plaster on the outside. He shaded the walls. This is real important to stay cool. He has a covered porch that goes all the way around the house. And he did a real smart roof. 60 to 80% of your heat loss and gain is through the roof. So we can build perfect walls and you can set a frying pan on, ruin our best efforts. He had a real smart roof that vented the air before the attic got hot. He had insulation in the ceiling, and it's a marvel. I love to take people in there. Fortunately, he opens his door whenever we want, and it's one that I always take people to get the earth block tour. Especially, I'm hoping for a 100-degree day, so that we can go to Charles and walk in. So that's and you said sustainable, energy efficient. Yes, and maybe I should turn it over to Lisa for energy efficient in cold climates. We did a house together in Castle Rock where they put data loggers in the wall. So we actually have some real data, which Lisa has a grip on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk about the cold weather, Lisa.
Sure. Yeah. So, my background in New Zealand, we didn't have to insulate the walls and certainly kind of below around the hemisphere, insulation is not required for, cooler climates. But here in Colorado, we are. I actually built a double wall with that cellulose loose fill insulation between a 3-inch cavity. So just there's a energy compliance code now that a lot of jurisdictions have that require us to meet an energy performance compliance. And there's 3 ways to go about it, and the way that we achieve it is through a performance method in which the whole building envelope is looked at as a whole. And we just got energy compliance for a house in Steamboat, so it's 9,000 plus feet elevation, and obviously a very cold climate. So back to kind of how your question, Alicia, about how we perform compared to modern homes these days. And you're right, homes are built to be very tight to kind of understandably kind of reduce, leakage in the home and things like that. I have heard stories of a development that went up here in Colorado, and they, a lot of these timbers that we use are dipped in formaldehyde for fire retardant purposes. And the contractor and the producer assumes that there's going to be enough off-gassing that happens during transportation and construction so that when the house is built and closed in, that they have off-gassed enough. But in this one development, they had not. So they had been closed in, and then people moved in, and then healthy people were getting nosebleeds and all sorts of really reactions to this off-gassing. And so that development actually had to be taken down. So, Jim mentioned the kind of the breathable aspect, that ability to absorb and release vapor, and that's really the ability of the clay in the walls itself. So, putting a cement stucco on a wall or something, a siding or something that's drywall, or any kind of non-breathable element on our walls, either inside or out, are going to kind of reduce that permeability or that breathability. So, but from an energy perspective, because our walls are at least 10 inches wide, and mine in Colorado are 15 inches with that gap I mentioned, they act as a thermal battery. So they're actually storing heat, either produced during the day or produced inside during the winter, and storing it and releasing it very slowly. So that is how we're able to stay really efficient compared to a framed wall with lots of potential mitigation or migration through the wall itself, heat or water or whatnot.
So essentially you don't need, because of that mechanism, are you saying that you don't really need like a heater or like an HVAC system, or would you still need those items?
Yeah, and that's obviously kind of unique to each home. We're looking at the Steamboat property. Do they need air conditioning? Probably not. The house in Castle Rock they did some mini splits, and they also had a wood burning stove, of which they primarily use to stay warm. They actually have really rarely turn on any mechanical heating or cooling. So that's kind of the goal, and we have kind of really thoughtful mechanical designers that look at our walls and look at the whole orientation of the house and openings and whatnot, and design something very thoughtful. Geothermal, there's a lot of possibilities now, but we never advocate for forced air.
Awesome.
Never.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. And so in a way, these type of homes reduce carbon emissions then, correct?
For sure. Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
not just in the production of the blocks and the production of the walls and that whole life cycle analysis thing of the embodied carbon, but certainly in the performance and the long-term performance. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Can you guys, okay, so I currently live in Arizona. Okay, say that I am a hypothetical client. I have some acreage out here and I want to build this home and I want to consult with you. Could you maybe just break down the steps of what that would look like for our audience if they were to consult with you to get a home built?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in, Jim. So obviously a lot of clients do come to me like with this initial request, and The first thing is, do you have land? Obviously, we can't get further much beyond the conversation without having a piece of property to talk about. Then I usually start with some conceptual design. What is it that they're looking for architecturally? Size of home? How do they live? Where is, a site visit to the site. Very shortly after that is I'll request a soils report. So I want to see what is the foundation, what are the subsurface soil requirements there, so that we can kind of look at what type of foundation system is needed. There's a lot of basements here in Colorado, and that's because we have to go often 4 feet plus deep. And so and excavating for a basement is very custom. So that kind of foundation system really drives the design. Again, will you have a basement? Are you doing helical piers or structural slab? From there, the design progresses into a full building set with engineering. We get it permitted, and the blocks are made and the walls are constructed. So working with masons kind of in different locations to help them understand how these blocks are laid, how they're finished, how lintels are set in, how bond beam is poured at the top of the wall. So that's our process, really, from conceptual to finished design or finished construction.
That's amazing. Thank you. And
Can I jump in here for a minute? I couldn't understand everything that Lisa said, but the architectural part and the structural part and all that stuff is her forte. When you ask that question about, you're a brand new client, you've got this land, my first question is, do you have clay? Because we have to have it to make blocks. And there's 2 ways you can get the blocks at your site. You can have them made there if you have the appropriate soil. We have found that it's frequently more efficient to have them made by somebody at their plant, like Lisa has, to get them just right and then ship them to you. A lot of people have a romantic desire to build their house out of the dirt that they're on, and you can. I did that exclusively for a couple of decades. Didn't have a block plant. I always rolled my machinery to the site and used either their dirt or we had some trucked in from someplace close. One of the limiting factors that we have is just geographical. There aren't enough of us is part of the problem. I had 3 calls last week, one from Pennsylvania, one from Virginia, and one from North Carolina. And I'm like, gee, I wish we had somebody on the East Coast, but we don't. And not that I know of, anyway. If there is, I sure want to know. I'll send them lots of business. But it becomes, because the blocks are heavy, very heavy, and the walls are very heavy, it becomes expensive to truck them. You've got a radius beyond which that $3 a mile for 1,200 blocks gets cost prohibitive. So our goal, both of us, in fact, all of us in this business, would be to have earth block plants regionally everywhere in the United States. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. I wanted to go back on one thing that Kaylee said earlier about alternative housing, looking at alternative housing. And I frequently bristle at that because sticks are an alternative and a bad one. I refer to it as kindling. I think it should be against the law to build out of something that rots and burns and the bugs eat. It's good stuff for violins, pianos, right on, but you wouldn't want to build a house out of it. It's just crazy. California loses, 6,000 to 10,000 houses a year to fire, and it's still code approved, so it's a battle we need to fight. And the thing about alternative construction, everything's alternative except us. We've been doing this for 10,000 years, not Lisa and I personally, but our predecessors, the giants upon whose shoulders we stand, have been doing this, as Lisa pointed out in one of our presentations that the walls of Jericho are 10,000 years old, and they keep finding them. This new stuff where they take the drones and they can see through the ground, and they just found this huge city in Egypt, gazillions of blocks. Of course, it's all earth blocks. And the Pharaoh that built that city, I can't remember his name, the third, somebody, Tutankhamun the third. Anyway, he stamped his initials on all the blocks, millions of blocks. So he was real proud of his block plan. And that was 3000 BC or something. So that just a little rant on alternative construction,
I can have a lot of respect for that, Jim, because I have that same complaint when people call herbalism, because I'm a licensed herbalist. When they refer to herbalism as alternative medicine, in my head I say, I think you mean the original medicine. So I think we should refer to your housing structures as the original housing structures and not alternative.
Right. No, we're not alternative. And, we always get the question, well, how much do they cost? And that's, you get that one all the time. And of course, that depends on your design for starters. And so you can't give a flat answer to that, but they want to compare it to something. And it used to be a couple of years ago that, and Lisa can chime in on this too, that I would say we're comparable to other masonry products. I mean, it's a masonry unit, and a couple of years ago, I would say we're a little more than sticks, kindling, just because of the labor. The materials aren't it. It's, if you got a block that takes a house that takes 10,000 blocks, it takes some time to stack those rascals, and they're heavy. So the labor thing, but now that labor has gone through the roof, I think we're probably cheaper. But the other thing is, answer I would always give to that is, what time frame are you talking about? The cost. Is that turnkey what the banker wants to know when you walk in the door? Or is that the cost of the building over time? Because if it's the cost of building over time, we're the cheapest thing on the market, hands down. The energy costs are significantly less. Maintenance costs are zero. And how long do they last? A stick house, I think the average lifespan is somewhere around 70 years. We all know about the 200-year-old farmhouse in Pennsylvania, blah, blah, blah. But the average is, around 70 years. And when people ask me how long they last, I jokingly say, I guarantee them for the first 1,000 years, come get me in 900 if I'm wrong, because there's really, it won't burn, the bugs won't eat it. It won't blow over. We're tornado proof. It's like, we're here to stay, it'll even, if you stabilize the blocks, we can even take a flood. If you flood a stick house, it's over, right? It's all wet and moldy and rotty, and you just got to knock it down. If you flood an earth block house, you go in, and providing the blocks were stabilized, you go in and sweep the mud out and move back in. That's the deal. So it's a no-brainer, really, when you know about it.
Yeah, thank you.
And then again, I mentioned, I don't know if this is while we were on the air, it might have been before, but about lime. Lime has a pH of 12.4, and mold can't grow there. It's impossible. So if you stabilize your blocks with lime, if you use lime plaster, lime is your friend if you're in the mold business. Or actually, lime is your enemy if you're in the mold business.
If you've ever watched the television series Bonanza, there's a Civil War fort not too far from the Ponderosa, where Little Joe and Haas, and they'd always get in fights with the soldier boys from Fort Churchill. Well, that's a real fort. That's down near Virginia City, out in the middle of Nevada, and it's an Adobe complex. Mm-hmm. It was built military style with the big overlapping eaves. The porch is all the way around, so the walls are all sheltered. Good for the desert heat, lasts forever. And when I found people were getting chemically sensitive, I would send them out to Fort Churchill to see how it felt, and everybody would recover.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you actually answered a lot of my questions. Thank you so much, Jim. But one important question that I had, and you had mentioned, the fires in California. How stable are adobe blocks against earthquakes?
Another question we get all the time, and just fine if reinforced correctly. Any masonry building, if it's a cinder block building in California, it has continuous vertical rebar encased in concrete, to hold up the building. It's not the cinder blocks. And so Lisa and I have a mutual friend, now deceased, unfortunately. Dr. Fred Webster was the leading seismic engineer in California for 40 years and designed a lot of adobe houses in California. Now, the reinforcement was extensive, and it consisted of, in those days, vertical and horizontal rebar, either within the wall or between two lengths of the wall, to give it the structural resistance it needed. Now, Fred worked with an engineer in Lima, Peru, Marcial Blondet. Marcial is a professor, an engineering professor at the Universidad Católica in Lima. Peru shakes all the time. I mean, it's earthquake after earthquake after earthquake. And a lot of people get killed because the peasants in the campo are all building out of adobe because it's all they have is mud blocks. But they don't know anything about building. They don't have bond beams, they don't have reinforcement, and so they have an earthquake and they all fall down and they get killed. And it's terrible. Consequently, the university is keenly interested in finding reinforcement systems for adobe that are affordable. The people out on the campo in Peru can't afford, truckloads of rebar. So they did a lot of tests, and they have a full-size shake table at the university. And they did a lot of tests, and they did a lot of stuff with reeds and fibers and all kinds of stuff, and a lot of success. I had the good fortune of visiting there some years ago and saw the shake table and talked to Gladys, the lady that ran it for 20 years. And we went out from the shake table building, and they had a small building, adobe building outside. And I said, "What's this one about?" And she said, "Well, we built one of these because this one did the best. This was the system that worked the best." And we call it the basket. And it's the earthen wall with mesh on both sides. And as the wall's laid up, you put through ties through the blocks, 1 foot on center. Then when the building's up, you put the mesh on and you tie those two meshes together. And I can send you, Lisa has it too, videos of the shake tables in Lima where this was tested. And they couldn't knock it down. They can't knock it down. I mean, the thing would do this, but it wouldn't fall over. And Fred, who worked with Marcial in Lima, also did shake tables in California. I can't remember if it was Berkeley or Stanford, but he had videos also. And the kind of the interesting story about that is that the shake tables are very expensive. And so they didn't want to build a building with no reinforcement, knock the whole thing down and build another building. So they built a building, no reinforcement. They shook it a little bit. Corners start to crack. They stop. They patch the corners. They put a bond beam on it. They shake it till it cracks. Then they put a roof diaphragm on it. They shake it till it cracks. Anyway, this thing had gone through, 7, 8, 9 earthquakes before they got to the final one where they had actually put the basket on it. And they called in the press, the TV stations and the newspapers and stuff, check it out. We're going to knock it down today. This is the last one, Couldn't knock it down. Could not knock it down. And their shake table, the shake table in Lima actually shakes. It goes like this. You'll see it on the video. But the one in, I can't remember if it was Berkeley or Stanford, but anyway, they're measuring ground acceleration. So they run the table and stop it. Bam, like that. And this building would just be like that, and just come back. And they couldn't knock it over. So now, unfortunately, that reinforcement system is not code approved in California. I mean, that's right. It's something, you know, if our little earth building group had the kind of finances that the concrete industry had, we would send some representatives out to California and lobby the building department to make fireproof, affordable buildings, because it's the reinforcement that keeps earth block or adobe buildings from being common. I mean, they were real common in California for, you know, since the Spanish got there. But since we got building codes, they're not. And they're not because they're outlawed, but because the reinforcement is cost prohibitive.
It's almost like a tragedy in waiting, I feel like, because I mean, we're seeing the effects of climate change, and these climatic events are going to keep occurring, fires, flooding, etc. And the integrity of our buildings is just can't withstand these things. And I'm wondering if you, Jim and Lisa, have you guys been trying to maybe reach out to these building associations to push maybe in the direction of builders doing more Adobe style homes, or maybe you could speak more to that.
Yeah.
I think that what, you know, as Jim mentioned in California, that's a really difficult market. And I did hear of an Adobe house just got approved in Southern California. So that was quite a big accomplishment. There's definitely some champions down there that are doing good work and doing a lot of good code work, building code work. So it's not impossible. And as I mentioned, I practiced in New Zealand, which is very seismic. So, you know, equivalent seismic activity to parts of California. So there was an earth building code that's very extensively written for New Zealand. Again, approved vertical reinforcing, horizontal reinforcing throughout the wall. What it really takes, I find, is, you know, just with the kind of like with any change, you know, if you compare ourselves to, say, the organic food industry back in what, the 70s or so, 80s, I'm not sure, but it's a consumer-driven desire. So having more of these houses go up, I think both Jim and I are seeing some shift right now where developers are kind of starting to show interest, so we can make a larger impact in larger communities. And that's being more recently driven by, I think, the cost of lumber, but also this kind of driving, you know, green building growth. So, you know, yes, while we are happy to support and educate building departments, it really, the desire to learn and want to do so has to come, you know, from those who are pushing on it. You know, we are a small boutique niche market and not funded by a large association. So doing a lot of that outreach and marketing is difficult for, you know, a niche market that's trying to keep the lights on and keep going. So
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. You know, when I think about Adobe homes and just conventional homes, it's like, it just seems logical as a more eco-friendly way of living, because I mean, when you have to build homes, you have to do massive deforestation, right? You have to tear down our trees. That reduces our oxygen. That, you know, reduces the ability for the planet to cool down. And just using mud straight from the ground, I mean, it's like there's no comparison to me in my own mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know.
well, and you are unique, unfortunately. You know, I think even when I first got involved in this work, my parents were envisioning me building these mud huts and the jungle of, you know, and poor Lisa, what's going on down there? And it wasn't until they came and visited me that, you know, these were actually $1 million beautiful homes, and again fell in love with it. So Kelly's over there laughing. So I think the more beautiful examples we get up, there's a stigma against, you know, even in developing countries like Africa, they are wanting to gravitate away from their traditional construction because of the social stigma that they think concrete block is more you know, desirable from an, you know, economical point of view. So so we're drifting, but I think it really is going to take, advanced progressive countries like ourselves and to bring it back, to the table, to the high performance home methodology, and and now we're we're seeing new grants come out and new money put towards studies and testing of this material. So there's definitely always new opportunities, but certainly greater ones now, perhaps.
Yeah, as Jim mentioned earlier, trying to find you guys was like a needle in the haystack. I mean, I was getting hit left and right by websites that are no longer functional, and it was almost breaking my heart. Like, man, this is the original way of building homes, and there's not a lot of you guys. And I know that on Jim's site, he does do workshops. Now, Lisa, I'm not sure if you do as well, but if people are actually interested in learning more or wanting to build their own homes, how can they reach out to you and get that going?
Send an email. I get I really wish that I could do workshops like once a month. Because the demand has increased significantly, and it's going up almost in a logarithmic way suddenly. I don't get it, other than the cost of lumber is one thing, or maybe people are just getting smarter. Here in Texas, it's kind of a joke. I say people, bulletproof has become really a big deal. It's not about health or, fireproof. They want bulletproof houses. All right. We can do that too. It's not a problem. So I have an uptick in prepper, prepper people. They're prepping for either the grid going down, which, who knows when the Russians are going to pull the plug anytime now. Or the Civil War, which, you watch the news and go, is this what's going to happen? I mean, it's nuts, but are they nuts? I don't know. I guess time will tell, but we have what they need anyway, which is, bulletproof blocks.
Obviously I do hold workshops and have held workshops in the past, and they're great. We usually get a client from them, from the 10 or 15 that show up. They are a lot of effort. They're a lot of planning. They're a lot of work to kind of put forth. It does require, 5 days of someone's time to come and work for free, as part of a workshop. And they're always a great group of people, very enthusiastic, eager to learn, taking notes, great students. I just question right now if, how we best disseminate the information. And I think it might be from, really kind of training masons, training professionals, training architects and engineers, because they're the ones that are also, infiltrating to the market and to the homeowners. I've had a real passion and desire to kind of get into schools, train up our young engineers in university, get in the elementary schools, give them little baggies of clay that they can make their own bricks with. And so I think that the workshop, in my point of view, needs to shift a little bit and be, again, more of a kind of professional outreach and from our growing youth who are kind of coming, eventually going to be one day our professionals. So that's one point of view.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with Lisa, especially when she mentioned the workshops are a lot of work. And we did some together and they were a lot of work. But my thought was, if we had a place set up where it's sort of like Dwell Earth is another earth promoter, and they do workshops, but it's the same one over and over and over, so the preparation becomes less significant, and they're not. Lisa and I, when we were doing, we always built something, Babs, build a brick shit house, that's what we did. And it was, you know, took them all the way through the foundation to the roof and everything else. And but if you keep it to a classroom and a little hands-on and do the same thing over and over, you could do it. But Lisa's also right, to really reach a bigger audience, we need a bigger pulpit. You know, we need the building departments and the universities would be, you know, if they would put earth and building classes in their architecture school and in their engineering school, that would really help. You know, one of the hardest things we have is finding engineers. What is that? You know, and so it's like we have to educate everybody every time. You know, and my joke is the hardest ones are the electricians because they only have one tool. You know, they got a right angle drill for drilling holes and studs, you know, and they show up and, geez, a solid wall, now what, you know? So you have to work with them in advance. There's obviously the right way to do it, and it's not that hard, but it's like you're training people almost every time you build a building, unless you've got some subs you can use over and over, you know? So these are some of our difficulties, you know, is in expanding the thing. Now, I will say, I've built in 8 states, and I've been in a lot of county building departments. And this is another thing that is tough, that it's not a national code. It's like every county does what they want, you know. So every time you cross a county line, you got a new building department, and you have to find a friendly face down there. I was stunned and amazed when I moved to Texas, and the first time I went into the San Antonio building department and plopped a brick down on the electrical inspector's desk with an electrical box on it. This is the way we want to do this, and your guys are out there and they won't do it, you know. And it was amazing. It was like the guy just looked at me and said, well, this is the way to do it. This is the right material. Where'd you get this? You know, and I was telling him about it, blah, blah, blah. He said, oh, great. He said, I grew up in New Mexico. So all of a sudden we had a friend, and the whole San Antonio building department has been gung-ho. I mean, they are helping us. We have a little organization in San Antonio, Earth Construction Initiative, and we actually have 2 people from the city in the group and on the board from the building department. So it's a good inroad, you know, and we just have to continue making those inroads, and we have to continue making more of us, Lisas and Jims, you know, and it's not everybody that'll jump into this, you know. It's not the norm. The equipment's expensive, so there's hurdles.
Do you have a
And
training program avenue for developing more leases and gyms?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
If somebody wanted to become a Lisa and Jim and learn from you guys, how could that happen?
I think that's a great question. You know, I'm seeing, interestingly a lot this year, students from university here at CU Boulder and School of Mines reach out to me for an internship. And they just, you know, kind of similar to myself at that age, had a real draw towards it. And so I'm very, very open to kind of bring on, you know, and even people that want to start their own business. I've had a few visitors this year come and, can I check out your yard, and where can I get the same equipment as you? And so I think, you know, understanding that what this market needs, and we're not so much worried about competition, but, you know, really kind of establishing maybe our own little region and, you know, place that we service, and supporting each other in that. So I think, you know, if someone was really interested, that while we don't have kind of a program or, you know, a formal, you know, process for that, I think Jim and I are both very, very open to kind of disseminate the information. And I mean, there's a conference every other year in New Mexico called Earth USA, and that's kind of where a bunch of us Adobe people get together from around the world and share papers and stories and talks. So it's a great community. It's really actually become a family for me. And so, but I have heard of a research paper that someone did about how to kind of break down some of these either cultural associations of these disintegrating, mud blocks, mud bricks in the middle of nowhere kind of thing to beautiful homes that they are and buildings that they are. And really it takes just good professionals doing good work. And I think hopefully supporting each other in doing so.
Amazing. Well, Keely and I are going to drop off our husbands to your doorstep so they can learn. And my husband and I are actually going to be buying land. And so we're trying to figure out what kind of alternative homes can we put up on our land.
Where are you?
Well, we're currently in Arizona. We'll be scouting land more in the Northwest. And yeah, we're definitely, we can't, I can't, I'm okay here, but it's been a pain in the butt to find a place that has been safe for me, mold free. And I'm one of those chemically sensitive as well. So knowing that, I have a connection to you guys and also presenting this information to our audiences, because the stats right now is 50% of residential homes have mold, 85% of businesses, those buildings have mold. There is a huge explosion of people with sensitivities. I'm talking thousands of people that are being driven out of their homes, can't even go into a grocery store, living out of their cars, tenting, camping, because they cannot stand the toxicity that these homes breed from the materials that are used. So just knowing that you guys exist and knowing that there is a way to live your life in a more healthful manner that doesn't include you living out of your car. You can actually live in a structure, just has to be built out of the right materials. And these materials are actually very climate friendly. It can withstand these major climatic events. This is such an important message. We are 100% your supporters. If we can help in any way, shape, or form to bring you guys up, help your businesses, refer clients, we are there for you for sure. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, because again, we're seeing the people that are suffering with what we've suffered with. There's just so many people dealing with a lot of stuff and losing their homes, and they just don't have to if they're able to live in something that's more sound for not only for the environment, but for their own bodies as well. So I just wanted to move towards a closing. I know we're going over a little bit here. Sorry for my late intro. But was there anything else that you guys wanted to share? Maybe plug in your websites or any information where our audience can find you?
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing, Alicia, before we close too. And it's back to the health aspect and kind of the interior home. And I know a lot of the people listening might not be thinking this is great, but I'm not going to kind of build a new house right now, or and I think there's ways to make initial improvements on the home in which people are living in. And there's been some good research done just on internal clay plasters. So, putting a new type of coating on the inside of our walls. I think it does kind of restrict some of the humidity issues and mold issues. And Jim, I think that you and I probably there's people in this industry that are applying good lime plasters and clay plasters, American clay, and some others. But that's one thing that I would kind of advocate for folks to look into if they're wanting to make some initial improvement. Obviously, what the Adobe and the earth blocks do from a high performance level, they're structural, they're soundproof, fireproof, and all these other things. But to try to get some of the benefit of that healthy inside environment, there's now clay panels, hemp replacement for drywall, and so there's some new emerging products on the market now that I think could be, things that could be used for renovations. But anyway, I'm Lisa with Colorado Earth, and you can find me at coloradoearth.com.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And if you could just share me those links with those alternative building materials that our guests or our audience will be able to maybe use in their homes in case they are injured. Could you share those items with me? Okay, cool. Great. Thanks. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah. Did you, Lisa, did you mention Smarter Building Systems? Did you mention Nick in Rhode Island?
Just now? No.
Yeah. Well, Smarter Building Systems has a lot of really great products. Non-toxic is the whole deal. And Safe Coat is the producer of sealers and paints and stuff that are zero VOC and all that kind of stuff. So there's two.
Awesome. And where can our guests find you, Jim?
James at earthblocktexas.com, or I just changed my website, and then I was so upset with the old one that the guy that started the new one was frustrated with me because I didn't get him my info. I said, just put it up anyway. So my website's not much, but the videos are there, which seems to be, since the age of videos, it's almost like, videos and Instagram, and you don't need a website. It's just amazing what's generated from just those two sources. But there's a lot of videos there, which is, I guess, something to look at. And then my email.
Great, thank you so much. And Eric, I'm sorry, did you want to ask them any poignant questions that you didn't have the opportunity to do so?
Well, I just wanted to comment on the insanity of stick-built houses that incorporate copper plumbing into the walls when the lifespan of the copper is around 30 years. They expect you to completely rip out your walls, remove all the copper and replace it. Now, obviously, if you expect your house to last more than 30 years, this is going to be a problem. So I imagine with the Adobe houses, the rammed earth, you probably put all the plumbing and electrical external where it's easily accessible.
You can. That's a smart way to do it. That's what the Europeans do. That's what the house in Castle Rock, they did all their electrical on the outside, made it real easy. Most people don't. And, there's the electrical installation is a discussion. I have found that, through the floor is the easiest, and then up. Or we build chases or.
Well, thanks to all the chloramine that they're putting in water these days to control the bacteria, the copper pipes are breaking down faster than ever. So I would anticipate that if you have a rammed earth construction, after about 30 years when it starts leaking, you'll have no choice but to put the plumbing system to sleep and install an external system anyway.
Good point.
Is that what you guys are seeing more often now, installing externally instead of internally?
Not too much.
Do you work a lot with copper plumbing, or do you, I guess I really don't know if this is a copper plumbing issue, or if this is a PCR plumbing issue, or if this is an all plumbing issue where we should also begin a conversation about maybe having, excuse me, having all of our plumbing being exposed for this purpose. I mean, I think that's a really good point.
You bet. That's a good point.
Yeah. But it sounds like you work really personally with the people that you build for, so that they would always have that choice.
Right. Almost everyone is a one-off.
That makes sense.
And,
yeah. So put it in your side notes. We recommend exposed plumbing here at Exposed.
No, the other thing,
Mold.
I've done this in a couple of houses where it's not exactly exposed, but for instance, in my first one, my house in Colorado, it had to do with the design. I had a basement, a main floor, and a second story. And in the basement, in one corner of the basement, was the laundry room and the bathroom for the downstairs bedroom. And then on the main floor was the master bath, and right back to back with that was the kitchen. And then on the top floor, there was the bathroom for the master suite. So all the plumbing was vertical. I wasn't running pipe 50 yards down the wall, So I just built a big chase in the wall and ran all the plumbing up and down the chase. And you could open the door and look at the plumbing, click. That worked well. It's another way around it,
I think the main thing is just having access, to the electrical and plumbing. Changes are possible. People that want to kind of do additions or take down a wall, these things can happen. Again, in the cavity or allowing a kind of internal kind of chase, so to say, in the wall itself. So we can, as long as we can access things and make changes from the top of the wall or bottom of the wall or floor, as Jim mentioned, or if we can think about design and having a framed wall in the inside of the house where a lot of the plumbing goes for kitchens or laundry or whatnot. So it's just something that we consider, but certainly it's very possible to have it all be safely part of the wall system. Yeah.
Great. Eric, any more questions?
No, I think that about does it for me.
Eric, if you want to talk some other time and have a lengthy discussion about plumbing and electrical installation, we could do that.
Okay, great.
That sounds perfect.
I was just going to say that if you're building a 1,000-year house, you better plan for the plumbing to last a long time or be replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the building's going to last longer than pretty much everything else, including the residents.
Right. I just loved your point, how you were talking about like the pyramids, in like Egypt. And I didn't even know that those were like made out of Adobe blocks. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, the Great Wall of China is predominantly Adobe, and the walls of Jericho. I have a question for your group. What would help disseminate the information, or would there be additional testing, or what would be helpful that from our side that we can support, people here that are listening and have these concerns?
Absolutely. I just think lines of communication, just maybe being available, us providing them with your information and them just kind of going for it. And I know 100% your guys' phones are going to be ringing after this episode because people are that desperate for different alternative housing. And again, like I said, even my husband and I, we're going to be acquiring land and building Adobe Homes, and we'll definitely have a spot for Eric and Keely on our property. So we got to get to work on bringing up these homes.
Lisa, do you have like a podcast or a newsletter or something?
Do I?
Or your company? I mean, because what I feel like you're asking is how can you reach more health injured people in our audience how can what we're doing be a bridge between your work and the people who need your work?
Well,
right,
because I'm putting together these kind of technical white papers right now that really kind of speak to some of the technical specifics of our wall system, everything from foundation system to finishes. So if I could do one specifically on this topic.
And what's this topic to you?
This topic to me is really about, healthy living inside the home. Like how do the product itself really benefit someone's just health while they're inside the home. I mean, from mold, from I want to hear kind of what are the different level of sensitivities. I mean, I'm hearing mold is one. Are there others?
So a large majority of the people who have become chemically injured, the gateway in which their chemical injury occurred is through toxic mold.
Yeah.
And so that's one population. And then there's like my husband, his gateway was spraying pesticides, working on his farm since age 6.
Right.
And then there's other people maybe through like a chemical war exposure or some kind of environmental exposure at work. And so those routes can all be different. Toxic mold is something that we specifically stick to for research purposes. We have to continue saying toxic mold, toxic mold, toxic mold, because Eric's connection to an original research instrument is our last hope in getting any real researcher trying to find some answers to what this is doing in the environment to really prove this, which would then solidify your work in terms of verifying that healthy homes are needed,
Right.
because that's absolutely a piece. But we would really be happy to participate in any education outreach efforts in terms of educating your audience in the red flags to be aware of the way that their homes are making them sick, because that's actually our greatest challenge, or my greatest challenge as a healthcare provider actually is when I tell someone you have nerve damage in your neck and can't feel your arm because you never fixed your leaking roof 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They fire me to go get an MRI and painkillers indefinitely because they don't want to have a talk about their house.
No.
And so it sounds like my biggest barrier is your biggest barrier. And I am 1000% in this to stop that, because I don't know what else to do.
What would it look like to have someone from your team like come to one of our homes here, and what would the kind of testing of it or verification of it that
we don't do any testing. That's what sets us apart, is we are aware of all of the actual failures in like mold testing. If our team or anyone from our team came to your house to test it in any way, it would literally be to use our hypersensitivity senses, which no one believes us about in the main industry, is to say, do we feel good here or do we not? And
So
that would be our test.
That would be okay. So I could arrange for your group to come and have a weekend in a earth block home, an Adobe home, and maybe write a testimony.
We would know very quickly if we felt healthy there or not. And if we could make a testimony of feeling healthy in something like that, that would be a very bold statement, because we all suffer just beyond.
But there's no kind of scientific test, like some, I don't know.
That's the issue that you're facing, is that the current testing, even when somebody who has mold in their house has a test, they could have a false sense of security with nothing showing on the test. Even when people who are hypersensitive, like me, Eric, and Alicia, there is no test that exists that can find our hypersensitivity. And this is our greatest issue. People don't believe what we're saying, and civilians, look, if the technology exists, we don't have access to it, and we're not getting access to it. We are forced to rely on our senses. And that is the trouble with the population that we serve, is no test can prove to them what their problem is. And so they're, they get misled. They just get told that the test showed their houses are fine, the remediation is complete, and because they're still sick, they have these 6 other autoimmune conditions, arthritis, and digestive problems. And sorry you can't tolerate bleach. You're probably too stressed.
Yeah, my methodology during the Lake Tahoe outbreak, when people were becoming chemically sensitive, was to take them to various buildings to assess their response. And part of that was to go to old abandoned buildings, which tended to be fine, or like I say, to the Adobe buildings out at Fort Churchill, where they were also fine. So there was a problem with modern construction, and going back to the old ways with low chemicals, low mold, people felt great, would recover. But when we compare our hypersensitivity, even by repeated exposures, repeated assessments of taking hypersensitive people out to these places, we would then subject our researchers and doctors to the test of finding out if they could correlate their test results with our perceptions. And every time they failed miserably.
I hate hearing that. I mean, I mentioned some grants that are becoming available, and this could, and I mean, I'm looking for ideas to do studies with, So There's also a medical organization, sorry, I was talking to my doctor neighbor, Academy of Environmental Medicine, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. So there could be a wing of the medical industry, such as maybe this association, that could, that's really looking now at air quality and living.
Yeah, unfortunately, these are the very people that are fighting against us
Oh,
because they've
okay.
determined that their tests are the gold standard. And if our sensitivity doesn't match their test, we are dismissed as being kooks, lunatics.
Yeah. Well, we need to bridge this gap, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a major reason why there's a lot of suppression of this, and it's because it would basically tear down the insurance industry.
There's a reason your housing company isn't the primary way of building, even though it's better for everyone's health, because it would take away from medical insurance, pharmacy dollars. I mean, that's you guys using a house as healthcare destroys all their healthcare costs. But we're at the point where we literally need our housing to be our healthcare. I mean, our air quality and where we live absolutely is our healthcare.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are tests. There's ERMI tests that show, what's settling on the surfaces of your home. There's air tests, they suck the air out of your home to check. But I mean, they each have
pros and cons. And
right.
You're not always going to find Stachybotrys in an air test.
Yeah.
Those tests are completely fraudulent, and the people who sell those tests are aware of their limitations.
Yeah.
Well, if we could arrange for a weekend visit and a testimony written by someone from your team, I'd be really. I have clients that I'm sure would be open to this, and
we would be happy to help you, and we would be honored to do that, because if we could all find part of what I'm looking for too is, as a health provider who has now realized that the tools that I relied on to help people heal are no longer adequate for today's current environmental issues, how can I, with integrity, recommend any healthcare tool? It literally comes down to, where are they going to spend time to be healthy? So this is the new form of medicine.
Yeah.
We could build a city.
We need to build cities.
Yeah.
At least a city.
I have 20 acres in Oaxaca, and Alicia is getting land in the States, so we can go international.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Fort Churchill.
Well, boy, Oaxaca.
I mean, we're serious. We're desperate for change. I mean, we give in the towel every day at 5 o'clock because we're so overwhelmed with not being able to help.
I mean,
well, it's clear that if you've got a good roof on an Adobe house, it'll last forever.
Yeah, the idea is a good pair of boots and a good hat.
Yeah. It pains us that, Keely, Eric, and I, we have people, I mean, desperate for help, and they are suffering beyond anything that you could imagine. And I've been there, and for me, getting the land is not just about me, but it's more for me to help people get out of a very bad situation where they feel like they want to kill themselves, where they feel like their entire family is so sick that they can't even work and function. And it's really personal for me. And that's why I do this work, because desperately find people like you, because this is people's lives every day, and I see the suffering every day in my inbox of people asking me to help them, and I can't, and I want to, and that's why I'm putting it out all on the line to get land and put up homes for people that need it, and so that way they can survive and live life. So thank you.
No, thank you, Alicia. And again, I do feel like a shift is happening. We are seeing more thoughtful developers that are not caring just about the bottom dollar, but about there's one
Yeah.
maybe out there that I'm talking to that I think that, you know, can start to create these healthy communities, and it involves things that we all want, like food production and green energy and community, and, you know, all these things that bring health and wellness. So let's do more and support together. You know, again, I mentioning some of these other products. Our clients are wide a variety as deep as this topic. So let's kind of go offline and talk about kind of a testimony that we can prepare.